More people are unemployed than the government is telling us. Professor Richard Wolff explains why. Check it out, leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. A couple of days ago, Felix Salmon over at Axios.com published this piece, America's True Unemployment Rate. And Felix says if a person who is looking for a full-time job that pays a living wage but can't find one is the definition of unemployed, then 26% of Americans are unemployed. If you measure unemployment as anybody over 16 years old who isn't earning a living wage, we have 54.6% unemployment in the United States. For black Americans, 59.2% of Americans are unemployed. The official unemployment rate is 3.6%. What is going on here? This makes no sense at all. On the line with us is our old friend, Professor Richard Wolff. He's an economist, a professor of economics, co-founder of Democracy at Work, author of numerous books. His latest, The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. He's the founder of democracyatwork.info and his website, rdwolff.com. You can tweet him at Prof. Wolff. And PROF, Professor Wolff, welcome back. Tell me, I know that we've discussed unemployment before, but I'd like to do a deep dive here. What's the history of this? How did we get to this point? And how is it possible that we have these low unemployment rates here in the United States?
Well, it's crystal clear to most of us watching that what began as a fairly technical debate among a few of the people, mostly in and around the Labor Department, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a debate about how best to measure unemployment, which is a difficult topic, and there are legitimate differences in how to count it. That was quickly overtaken by political interests. Usually the government in power doing everything it can to lean on the statisticians to come up with the smallest possible number, and those out of power hoping to get in, pushing for the reverse, that is, to count all the people that you could legitimately claim. And what you see in that Axios article is what the result is, namely, depending on how you choose to count what you think is important, you come up with extraordinarily different numbers. As little as, single-digit unemployment, which is what the Trump administration, for example, now uses, with an awful lot of media following suit, or any one of half a dozen alternative measures. It has even gotten to the point where it's so acrimonious that the Bureau of Labor Statistics issues a whole raft of unemployment numbers, not just one. There's U1, it's called, U2, U5, U6, there's a whole bunch of them, and they vary quite significantly because their definitions are, in fact, different. Bottom line, if you use the Axios article, and it's a very good article, by the way, if you use it, you will get a real grasp on what should be clear to Americans, which is, if by unemployment you mean people who are unable to get a decent full-time job at something more than, $20,000, $25,000 a year to live on, if that's your measure of who's unemployed, then half of Americans looking for work, in fact, can't get that kind of job. And if you add to that the people that aren't looking anymore, well, you're talking about an economic system that has failed. The job of an economic system is to give people work at decent income, just like it's the job of an economic system to be prepared for a virus that we know is coming at any time. And we live in a system that is failing on both counts.
So in the 1930s, the unemployment rate was somewhere between 25 and 35% at various points, as I recall. How differently was that measured then versus now? And how close, in your mind, are we to the actual unemployment rates we saw in the 1930s? I mean, we've got 8 million people, the New York Times had a piece this morning, 8 million people have slid into poverty just since May in America. That's pretty scary. I mean, we've got a huge eviction crisis looming on the horizon. It seems to me like we're in Great Depression territory, but that's certainly not the message that the Republicans, the Trump administration, and sadly the media are putting out.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm really upset by it because I deal with it almost every day with these questions. Let's start quickly. The official rate in the depths of the Depression, so that would be 1933. The peak of unemployment was listed and is usually carried in history books as 25%. So roughly 1 in 4 Americans in the labor force at that time were unemployed, which means that literally every family in the United States had somebody, father, mother, cousin, uncle, somebody unemployed, often more than one, which meant that those who were still employed had to share their income and their livelihood expenses with those who weren't. Remember, at this time, we didn't have unemployment insurance or Social Security. The difficulty for the American people, unspeakable if we look back. I would argue that today we have levels of unemployment that are at least as bad as the Great Depression, and I say that only because so many other economic indicators indicate that we are at or beyond the level of crash that we had in the 1930s. Therefore, I would tilt on those grounds towards the higher end of what's happening. And if you look at who's caught in it, black and brown people, who are now a significantly larger part of our population than they were in the 1930s, are suffering the disproportionate impact of all of this. If you add that we have interrupted schooling in a way we did not in the 1930s, well, then the deep scars of this collapse and the implications of the failure to be prepared for the virus or to contain it are going to be hurting us as a people and a nation for a long time, just as the Great Depression shaped most of the rest of the 20th century's economics and politics. I think what we're going through now will do the same.
In the Washington Post today, Greg Sargent, I believe it was, although I may have that wrong, it was one of the regular columnists, was writing how Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate have largely given up on any idea of governing next year. That they can see the handwriting on the wall. They think the Republicans are going to lose the Senate. They've already lost the House, and they're definitely going to lose the White House. And therefore, what they are doing is busily running around Washington, D.C., metaphorically speaking, and putting landmines everywhere they can so that when the Biden administration, comes in on January 20th, they will be presented with horrible, absolutely horrible economic circumstances, and they will be restrained in their ability to do anything about it. They're already starting to scream about budget deficits, something that Republicans always talk about when Democrats come into office. How much damage can they do, and how long might it take to recover from that kind of damage?
Very difficult, a good question, but very difficult to answer. And the reason has to be hammered home here. The United States is not the dominant player in the world today the way it has been for most of the last 75 years. And that reality has not yet sunk in. The desperate effort of the Trump and Republican administrations to shift from a globalization approach to a nationalism, that's the desperate effort of people, doing that famous thing of closing the barn door after all the animals have gotten out. It's not working. It hasn't worked. We haven't revived manufacturing. We haven't changed our deficits with international trade or even with China after all of the political theater. I think what you're seeing is hinted to us by what the Republicans said when Obama won in 2008. Namely, they're going to do everything they can to make his presidency a failure in order to then run on the grounds that he failed and get themselves into office, which is pretty much what they did or tried to do, and I think they're just following that playbook. Having said that, Mr. Biden and Kamala Harris are going to have quite the difficulty. Whatever amount of blame you want to put on the Republicans and Trump, and they deserve everything you put on them, the reality is our problems are into a system that is going to be a very big problem for a new administration, no matter how successful their landmine.